Chapter 16. Tentative Steps, July to September 1943. As World War II progressed towards its fifth year, the German war machine, which for Adolf Hitler had once seemed so assured of military supremacy, was well and truly faltering. Defeat at Stalingrad in February 43 had cost the Nazis dear, and the Allies were well placed to capitalize on their advantage. However, the Allied leaders were all too aware of the dangers still to be overcome, and they proceeded with the utmost caution, beginning to take tentative but very positive steps towards victory. By July 1943, progress was very definitely evident. At sea, the Allies were winning the Battle of the Atlantic. Measures agreed by Prime Minister Winston Churchill and US President Franklin D. Roosevelt at the Casablanca Conference 7 months previously to beat the U-boat menace were now yielding results. For the Germans, with morale plummeting among the U-boat crews, their commander, Grand Admiral Karl Dönitz, had no choice but to order them to withdraw from the main convoy routes in the North Atlantic. But for the Allies, it was just the boost that they needed. Success against the U-boats meant that the British and the Americans could proceed to build up forces for Operation Overlord, the invasion of Western Europe. In the skies over Europe, Operation Point Blank, the codename given at the Casablanca Conference for a round-the-clock bombing campaign against Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy, was underway. The American Army Air Force pounded targets all over Western Europe by day, while the Royal Air Force continued by night. In the meantime, the campaign in North Africa had ended in a total Allied victory. By mid-May 1943, nearly 250,000 German and Italian soldiers in Tunisia had passed into Allied captivity. For Nazi Germany, it was a bigger military disaster than Stalingrad had been. British and American military planners were now busy preparing for the next stage in the war, agreeing on a Hitler-first policy. In May 1943, Churchill, Roosevelt and their military staff met in Washington, D.C. in a conference codenamed Trident. With the whole of North Africa about to fall into their hands, the Allies agreed an invasion of Sicily, codenamed Operation Husky, was the next logical step. But over where to go after that, there was no consensus. The Americans wanted to invade northern France in order to secure a rapid end to the war. The British, too, wanted a cross-channel invasion, but only after Nazi Germany's powerful forces had been worn down elsewhere. They feared a bloodbath similar to the slaughter in the trenches of the First World War. The British argued that toppling Benito Mussolini's fascist regime, knocking Italy out of the war, and making the enemy fight for southern France, the Balkans or Greece would be the best way to guarantee success for Overlord. The Americans strongly disagreed, arguing that such a strategy would be a diversion of resources and effort. They were pushing for an early cross-channel invasion, as it would take the pressure off the Red Army on the Eastern Front. Because all the while, lurking at the back of their minds was the fear that if they didn't, the Russians might do a deal with Adolf Hitler, as had been the case in August 1939. Nazi Germany still possessed huge swathes of Soviet territory, and as the snow melted with the return of spring, Hitler's generals looked forward to avenging the disaster at Stalingrad. So, as preparations for Operation Husky fell into place, with Hitler convinced that his enemies were targeting an attack on Sardinia, thanks to the efforts of Allied intelligence, the battle to regain control of mainland Europe began in earnest. At the Trident Conference in Washington, D.C. the previous month, the combined US and British Chiefs of Staff had actually set a date for Operation Overlord for May 1st, 1944. Nevertheless, the British were keen to gain a foothold in Europe much sooner. Sicily was just the first step. The whole of Italy was the real prize, or so Churchill and his military advisers argued. But General George C. Marshall, U.S. Army Chief of Staff and the real driving force behind America's war effort, was under great pressure from General Douglas MacArthur, commander of Allied forces in the Southwest Pacific, to give him more resources for the war against Imperial Japan. Marshall was prepared only to commit US forces to an invasion of Sardinia, and instructed General Dwight D. Eisenhower to only mount such operations in exploitation of the attack on Sicily as might be calculated to eliminate Italy from the war.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?